This hour of the Costa Report is brought to you by Dole Food Company, the world's leading producer and distributor of fresh fruits and vegetables.
Welcome to the Costa Report. I'm Rebecca Costa, and thank you for joining me for another 2 hours of straight talk radio. I want to welcome members of the U.S. military who are serving in remote locations and are joining us over the internet today, and also new listeners joining us in San Francisco, Miami, Chicago, Atlanta, Boston, Denver, New York City, and from coast to coast, including new friends in Hawaii and Alaska. Thank you for your emails, your cards, letters, and your kind words of encouragement, and most of all, for allowing us to be part of your news week. In just a moment, we're going to take a break from politics and business to talk about a growing problem in our country, and that is the subject of opioid addiction. According to the National Institute of Health, we have a crisis on our hands. The American Society of Addiction Medicine claims that drug overdoses are now the leading cause of accidental death in America. Approximately 2 million individuals have become addicted to opioid pain relievers prescribed by their doctors. And the number of overdoses from these prescriptions has quadrupled since 1999. In just a moment, the president and CEO of Braeburn Pharmaceuticals, Beshad Sheldon, will be joining us to help us understand what's behind this runaway addiction and what is needed to stop the spread. But before Ms. Sheldon joins us, as is my custom each week, let me tell you a little about her background. Beshad Sheldon earned her degree in neuroscience from the University of Rochester and has more than 27 years of experience in the pharmaceutical industry. Prior to becoming the current CEO and president of Braeburn Pharmaceuticals, Sheldon spent 10 years at Otsuka America Pharmaceuticals as their vice president of patient and branding strategy and also as vice president of global marketing. Before accepting the post with Otsuka, Sheldon was the senior director of global marketing at Bristol-Meyers-Squibb and was responsible for managing new drug successes at SmithKline Beecham. She has been a director at Siricor since 2014 and is presently the founding member of the Female Opioid-Addiction Research and Clinical Experts Organization, an organization called FORCE. It's my pleasure to welcome to the Costa Report Ms. Beshad Sheldon. Thank you for joining us today, Ms. Sheldon.
Thank you so much for having me.
If it's all right with you, I want to throw out a few more statistics for our listeners today. I recently read that every day, at least 50 people die from prescription drug painkillers in the U.S., and that over 260 million prescriptions for painkillers are written each year, almost enough for every adult to have a bottle of pills. So let me ask you this. What's driving this surge in pain medication?
Well, a few years back, pain was added as a fifth vital statistic to be measured by all kind of quality organizations, and that was driven by the fact that a lot of people were reporting that their pain was not controlled adequately when they went to the hospital and they had serious situations. So things kind of tends to happen, the pendulum swung from not treating pain adequately to this overuse of opioids for, people will report going to the dentist and getting their wisdom teeth taken out and coming home with a 30-count bottle of hydrocodone, or having some other small procedure done and ending up with prescription opioids. And because there is a genetic predisposition, exposure and the environmental factors can lead to a significant number of patients becoming addicted. Addiction in general, and opioid addiction, is a disease. It is a brain disorder, as has been defined by the National Institute of Drug Abuse and the NIH, and there is just growing evidence that there is a connection to your genetic makeup, just like there is for high cholesterol or diabetes or many other chronic diseases.
Now, some studies indicate the problem with prescription painkiller addiction is higher in certain areas, such as the South and the Northeast. Is that true?
There does seem to be a line. down the Appalachian Mountains. So it does start kind of in the northeast, but it just goes down across the mountain line. And I don't know that there's a really good explanation as to why that is.
How about specific age groups or a prevalence amongst men versus women?
Yeah, I'm sad to report that women are catching up. This used to be a more prevalent condition in men versus women, but the latest reports are showing that it is becoming more prevalent among women as well. Sort of the classic profile is a middle-aged white man at this point.
And why is that? Is there an explanation for why middle-aged white men are more prevalent in terms of addiction to opioid prescription drugs?
I don't think there's any good data, and other than that, it would be speculation.
Mm-hmm. And just to put the problem in the U.S. into perspective, what does the prescription drug addiction and overdose rate look like globally? Is that also trending upward?
Certainly things are trending upward, much more with heroin and other illicit opioids. But as you mentioned earlier, we consume a considerable portion of the world's opioids, 80%. And obviously that results in significantly higher exposure to opioids. And then people who are predisposed to this disease are more likely to come down with it. But it is a growing problem globally. It's just that we are ahead, which is, of course, a bad thing in this case.
If it's genetically based, is there any evidence that certain races or certain genetic backgrounds would be less predisposed to addiction?
I think that's under study right now,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not. It's certainly possible that the data will eventually bear that out. Right now, we're kind of in the earlier stages of the research, and some genetic markers have been identified. I don't think we're far enough yet to say what races or age groups, et cetera, are predisposed. Certainly young minds are also very much predisposed to any substance use because the brain is not fully developed, and so it can essentially become hijacked much more easily by substances that are addictive.
Now, it's interesting that you say that this form of addiction to opioids is a disease. It's a disease of the brain, but it's not the way that the public traditionally thinks about a disease. We have trouble with calling addictions a disease, so help us understand that.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. We do seem as a society and as general public to have trouble with that. But in fact, the addiction is not a moral failing. It is not a choice. This has now been established by, brain imaging studies and by experts in both in addiction medicine and in people who are doing very early research, and very clearly stated by NIDA and other government experts and SAMHSA. I think there was actually a meeting back in March called the RX Summit and Heroin Abuse Summit, and President Obama was on a panel and called it the disease of addiction. I think it's time for people to realize that people don't choose to become addicted to a substance that then drives them to have to either sell or steal just to survive, and that after a while, most people who are using aren't even doing it to get high. They're just doing it to try and get normal. They're just trying to avoid the withdrawal symptoms. They're trying to avoid the cravings and feeling horrible. And that is like any other disease.
Mm-hmm. Now, we have to take our first break, but stay right where you are. We'll be right back with more from Beshad Sheldon. You're listening to the Costa Report.
Biodiversity is the very fabric of our lives. It is everything around us, all of nature, but human impact is diminishing biodiversity at an alarming rate. And because of that, the intricate web of biodiversity is unraveling in ways we don't fully understand, and our world is becoming less resilient. That's why we are biodiversity advocates. We're the E.O. Wilson Biodiversity Foundation. Guided by the greatest living naturalist, E.O. Wilson, we champion research and education that expands our understanding of biodiversity and informs worldwide conservation efforts. The E.O. Wilson Biodiversity Foundation is building a movement of environmental stewards like you who share our sense of responsibility for the living world that is our home. Join us in our quest to protect biodiversity, the fabric of our lives. Visit eowilsonfoundation.org.
The holiday season is just around the corner, and I want to share one of my favorite tips for being able to avoid that last-minute dash to buy something that screams, "I didn't put much thought into this." Now imagine a different scenario this year. Imagine the surprise on your loved one's face when they open the first page of the Watchman's Rattle and see a custom dedication in their name by the author. The best part is it's so easy. Just go to RebeccaCosta.com, do it right now, and click on the book cover, and presto, in less than 3 minutes you can request the inscription you want. So do it now. Go to RebeccaCosta.com, and this year, give an affordable, thoughtful gift that says, "This is for you and only you." That's RebeccaCosta.com.
Hi, registered pharmacist Ben Fuchs here. I've been studying healthy bodies for 35 years, and what I've got to tell you may shock and surprise you, but if you listen up, it may change your life. One of the more significant aspects of prescription drug toxicity involves the depletion of nutritional elements that fuel the detoxification system. Like all other processes in the body, detoxification requires nutrients. The B vitamins, vitamin C, magnesium, copper, and zinc are particularly important for detoxification to proceed, and the more detox chemistry is required, the more the system is going to be burning through nutritional raw materials. In other words, in the presence of excessive medication which the body must process as toxins, the detox machinery can become like a metaphorical sinkhole, diverting and draining key nutrients, keeping them from participating in the many other biochemical reactions that are responsible for maintaining the health and integrity of the human body. Vitamins, minerals, amino acids, fatty acids are not only key detox players, but they're also important molecules involved in providing cells with energy, protection, and as mechanical raw materials for building structural components of cells and tissues. The more drugs we take and the more they accumulate in the body, the more essential nutrients will be diverted to detoxification and away from vital biochemical reactions that are important for health and longevity. If these nutrients are not replaced via diet and supplementation, they can become depleted, and not only will purification and elimination of poisons be compromised, but so will the thousands of other biochemical reactions that likewise are dependent on the presence of these critically important biochemicals. Pharmacist Ben here, urging you to go to kscohealth.com to order Beyond Tangy Tangerine, the Healthy Start Pack, and other nutritional supplements that I personally use and recommend. You can purchase these premium quality products at wholesale prices online at kscohealth.com. That's kscohealth.com. I'm the pharmacist that believes that staying healthy and strong is not only about medicine, it's about giving your body the raw materials it needs to do its work. Go to kscohealth.com. Make sure you check out the cool videos too at kscohealth.com.
Welcome back to the Costa Report. I'm Rebecca Costa, and my guest today is the president and CEO of Braeburn Pharmaceuticals, and we've been talking about opioid prescriptions, addictions, overdoses, which are rising at an alarming rate. And before we went to break, you were explaining that addictions such as prescription painkiller addictions are a disease, which we now have physiological evidence that the brain compels and commands a person to continue to service the body with drugs, and when they don't, administers a lot of negative effects, such as withdrawal symptoms, pain, cravings, those kinds of things. So it's a downward spiral. Let's talk about why these opioid drugs are so addictive. Tell us in layman's terms how they work and how they are different from other kinds of addictions, like alcohol, for example.
the brain has a system of sort of checks and balances to, from an evolutionary standpoint, keep you well. And so there is a receptor called the mu receptor that once activated will serve to make a person feel better. So, if you hit your toe and you take some medicine, it leads to the internal systems of the body allowing the brain to modulate the pain effects and get you to feel better. The opioid products actually bind very tightly to this receptor, and they fully activate them to the point where they're releasing a good amount of dopamine, which is basically the internal feel-good and feel-good device for the body is the release of dopamine. And when the brain gets used to this, it just wants more and more, which is called tolerance. And when tolerance builds, after a while, it's not really releasing enough dopamine to make you feel so much better. It just notices that there's less when you don't have the effects of the exogenous opiates that you're taking. But internally, if somebody who runs a lot gets this endorphin high, it's because the body's internal endorphins go up to the mu receptor and bind to it.
Mm-hmm. Now, what about these reports that addicts of prescription painkillers often turn to heroin because they can get the same effect for much cheaper and they don't need a prescription?
We've heard quite a bit that there's an increase in the number of heroin users because patients, once they've become addicted to opioids, find it more and more difficult to get the prescription opioids. And it is, in fact, cheaper and often easier to get heroin on the street than it is to try and doctor shop or try and get it from someplace else, including on the street, of course, diverted opioids. Unfortunately, what's really scary is that the heroin out there is now becoming tainted with fentanyl, which is the most potent opioid, and so you have seen an even greater increase in the number of deaths from opioid-related overdoses, to the point where every day 78 people will die from an opioid-related overdose, whether it's prescriptions or heroin.
Now, there's a new statistic that's out that 4 out of 5 heroin addicts start out on an opioid-based prescription.
Yes, unfortunately, that has certainly been a growing concern. People start out innocently with a sports injury or a small procedure that leads them to getting prescription, and then they continue. Before they know it, they've become addicted, and therefore, after they can't get it through the normal channels, then they turn to the street, either for acquiring diverted prescription pills or to get heroin.
Now, earlier you mentioned that 80% of the world's opioids are consumed by the U.S. Did you mean 80% of the prescribed opioid medications?
Yes, 80% of the prescribed.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that. I had a little email here, and they said, I think she meant prescribed, and I thought, yeah, well, I got that, but you never can tell. This is radio, so we have to parse our words kind of carefully. Now that we have a much better understanding how prevalent and dangerous and easy addiction to prescription painkillers are, let's talk about some new ways to stop this trend. For example, several companies like Mitchell International are using predictive analytics, scoring algorithms to try to predict a patient's risk of opioid drug dependency before the first prescription is even written. What do you make of that?
I think it would be fantastic if we can have reliable predictive methods to determine a priori whether somebody is going to be at higher risk or not, because the fact is that there are many, many patients with pain who need opioids. And you can't cut everyone off because you know that there's going to be 10 or 15% who will become addicted. And at the same time, you have to protect the people who are at risk.
But there are alternatives to opioids that might be less prone to addiction. Is that right?
Oh, of course. The WHO pyramid of pain management actually says that you should start with, of course, you start with aspirin and Tylenol, and then you move up to nonsteroidals. Then you can go to more powerful nonsteroidals. You can rotate nonsteroidals. You can change doses. You can mix, nonsteroidals and aspirin. And so there's certainly different modalities. There are even things that involve psychosocial support, stress management and resiliency kinds of training. There's physiotherapy. There are lidocaine patches. There are many, many different ways that you can try to manage pain. But there are instances, there are circumstances when those things are no longer adequate. And so patients who actually have a need for those should not suffer because of the risk that does exist.
So should we assume that when an opioid is prescribed to a patient, that the doctor and the patient have worked their way up that pyramid?
That's how it's supposed to be, and every patient should first make sure that the first thing they get is not an opioid, and every doctor should of course start where the guidelines say they should start, and be very careful. And there's a difference between treatment of acute conditions for pain with an opioid and then using them chronically. And that's been the basis of the latest CDC guideline that talks about the fact that after a few months, at that point, you're probably opioid dependent. And if you have a patient in that situation, then you should look to treating the opioid dependence, which may or may not then become an addiction, with medications that are approved for it, such as buprenorphine.
But given the number of prescriptions being written, which are overwhelming, we can assume that not all doctors are working their patients systematically up that painkiller pyramid that you mentioned. We have to take another commercial break, but stay tuned. We'll be back after these important messages. You're listening to the Costa Report. I'm here today with Scott Caraccioli of Caraccioli Cellars, recent winners of the best sparkling wine in the U.S. in the Champagne and Sparkling Wine World Championship. Congratulations, Scott.
Thank you, Rebecca. Thanks for having me.
So what is it about your Brut Cuvée that beat all the other competitors around the world?
We really focus on creating an expression of the Santa Lucia Highlands and doing it the right way. And when you control the process from the beginning to the end and you have talent like Michelle and top-tier grapes, they really shine through.
This was a worldwide competition.
It was definitely a humbling experience. We were in a room with producers that have been making wine for over 100, 200 years, and was a huge honor to have Tom Stevenson give us the best U.S. Sparkling Wine Award. We fared really well overall. We had 3 wines win Best of Class, which was great.
Visit the Caraccioli Tasting Room on Dolores Street in Carmel by the Sea, or find us online at caracciolicellars.com, or reach us by phone 831-622-7722.
This is Mrs. Future from the Dr. Future Show. We have had Etheric Networks for 10 years, and it has always been really a stellar service. There's always a real person there. If you have any need to call them, they fix things as quickly as possible. Our service has hardly ever been down, and the service is just great. We live kind of in the middle of nowhere, and there are no other mainstream bandwidth providers where we are, and Etheric is a great service. We're really lucky we have it. Thank you, Etheric Networks.
KSCO Residential Special. Residential service up to 10 megabits per second, symmetric. That's up and down for $85 a month and $199 installation. With guaranteed minimum speeds and uptime, unlike our competitors. Etheric Networks. Call 650-399-4200. That's 650-399-4200. Etheric.net. That's Etheric.net.
What a surprise. The backers behind Measure Z aren't telling the truth about what Z really does to Monterey County. They claim it stops fracking in the county, but the truth is, there is not any fracking in Monterey County. Bottom line, Measure Z would result in a shutdown of traditional oil and gas production in the county. Production that has been done safely for nearly 70 years under the most stringent environmental regulations in the world. If Measure Z passes, the county could be forced to pay hundreds of millions of dollars in costs and lose over $8 million a year in property tax revenue, which could lead to devastating cutbacks for our police and fire protection in Monterey County. That's why the Monterey County Farm Bureau, the Monterey County Deputy Sheriff's Association, the San Nardo Fire Protection Association, and the Monterey County Hospitality Association have all joined together to urge a strong no vote on Measure Z. Paid for by No One Measure Z. Stop the oil and gas shutdown with major funding from Chevron Corporation and Era Energy, LLC.
Too bad about radio.
Oh, what do you mean?
Well, since television, you know. Hardly anybody listens to radio anymore.
Oh, I wouldn't worry about that if I were you. There's a radio in use for every man, woman, and teenager in America.
Really? Gee, I'd hate to think of them all turning them on at once.
They do. Every morning.
Who listens to radio? That go where you go medium called radio. That's with you every night through the long commuter fight, and in the morning with your toast and mumble-lady-o. Who listens to radio? No matter if it's summer, winter, spring, or fall. Who listens to radio? Only 150 million people. That's all.
Welcome back to the Costa Report. I'm Rebecca Costa, and if you're just joining us today, our guest is the president and CEO of Braeburn Pharmaceuticals, Ms. Beshad Sheldon. Tell us a little bit about your latest venture, Braeburn Pharmaceuticals, and the approach you've taken to helping combat prescription opioid addiction.
Sure. Braeburn Pharmaceuticals is founded on the expectation that, like all chronic diseases, long-acting implantables and injectables are going to be very helpful. So most of us are not very good at taking our medicines every day, and you know, I do it with my Lipitor. I can't manage to take it 3 days in a row. But that doesn't have the same kind of consequences that someone who has opioid addiction not taking their medicine will have, in that they could relapse. And, of course, this is such an unforgiving disease that one mistake, one relapse can lead to overdose and death. So what we have as our first of a suite of innovative products is a 6-month buprenorphine implant designed to be inserted by the clinician under the skin in the upper arm, and then it provides treatment, medical treatment, for 6 months. And during that time...
So is this a time-release system that's implanted under the skin?
Exactly. Mm-hmm. A time-release system that's implanted under the skin. Delivering medicine for 6 months.
Right. So if I need a painkiller, there's no danger that I'm going to overdose or be compelled to share my bounty with others. This is a time release painkiller system that is implanted into the body.
So buprenorphine and Probuphine specifically are actually approved for the treatment of opioid addiction, although buprenorphine also does have pain relief properties as a molecule and has been approved in other formulations for the treatment of pain. There's, for example, a patch, and there's some sublingual tablets. But the benefit of something that is inserted on the arm is that it can't be shared with somebody else. It can't be diverted, can't be sold on the street, can't be stolen by somebody else, and can't be accidentally ingested by children.
Now, is this dosing technology available today?
It is. Probuphine was approved on May 26th, and we've been shipping, so it's actually available on the market. Because this involves a small in-office procedure, we've been training physicians, but there's actually a locator map, and so people can go on and find a doctor in their local area.
And currently it's being used for people who are getting off of addiction. Is that right?
So Probuphine is indicated for people who've been doing well on buprenorphine, which is medicine for opioid addiction, and now are kind of in the later stages of their recovery, and they're stable, and allows them to have a medicine that they don't have to take every single day, which does become a burden. And given the stigma that we have in this country, even the act of going to the pharmacy and picking up your buprenorphine prescription can be something that's daunting for people, because, of course, the pharmacist will give you a funny look and know why you're there, et cetera.
Right. Now, what kind of clinical results have you gotten from using this implant system?
The pivotal study that led to the approval of Probuphine was actually just published in JAMA on July 19th, just the Journal of American Medical Association, and it showed that over a 6-month period, patients who were on this was a study that compared the 6-month implant with taking the medicine on a daily basis sublingually. And it showed that 85% of the patients in the Probuphine arm were opioid-free throughout the 6-month period.
So those who accepted the implant remained opioid-free for that 6-month period in which the implant was active.
The vast majority did.
Yeah, 85%, that's a huge number.
Yeah.
Right. So you must have been very excited about that trial.
We were very excited that what's been known and for which there's been quite a bit of medicine, which is quite a bit of evidence, that buprenorphine is a medicine that works and that should be used in the treatment on a regular basis. This is data that really helped increase that knowledge and added to the clinical community's knowledge about buprenorphine.
Mm-hmm. But as I understand it, there are other uses for this technology in terms of assisting in opioid addiction as well. Is that right?
We're also looking at different kinds of delivery mechanisms so that we have a weekly and a monthly injectable buprenorphine, and that will help ultimately to treat people from the very early stages where they need to come to the doctor more often and they're seen on a weekly basis. They would get the subcutaneous injections, and then they could move and graduate to a monthly injection, and then ultimately to the 6-month implant when they are further down the recovery path.
Now, what's been the biggest obstacle to getting physicians to agree to use implants?
Right now, we're in the process of not only training physicians, but working with insurance companies to make sure that there's coverage. As with all, and this is, part of the problem we're trying to solve in general in treatment of opioid addiction. No matter how we got here, we now have 2.5 million people who are dependent on opioids, and we need to treat them. And the systems to pay for treatment are not perfect. There's prior authorization required for pretty much every kind of treatment modality for opioid addiction. And so it's going to take some time while most insurance companies have been very receptive to the idea of a buprenorphine 6-month implant that can't be diverted and abused itself, it's a process and it takes time. So that's part of the issue.
Right now, is the implant covered by most insurance policies, or is that something you're having to work out with the insurance companies?
Right now, most of the insurance companies are working on their coverage policies, but in the meanwhile, both commercial and Medicare and Medicaid payers will look at each case individually, and the more cases they get, the more they will be instigated to put out their coverage policies more quickly. So far, we've had no denials in these kind of one-on-one medical necessity kinds of calls to insurance companies. And we've even had some providers that have said that they will cover without any kind of prior authorization, which is great. There's a number of national insurance companies that are very progressive and understand that a disease needs to be treated with medicine, and they understand the cost to society of not treating something like opioid addiction.
And I have to say that I think that your strategy is very commendable. You're dealing with the 2.5 million people that are, on opioid-based painkillers. But over time, you would think that you'll migrate toward implants that release the painkillers themselves, since the abuse seems to happen as soon as a prescription is made. I mean, we're talking about 4 out of 5 heroin addicts starting with a prescription opioid medication. So, it seems like if we could have some kind of implanted release system for the painkiller itself, that maybe we can head off the problem before it becomes a problem.
So this definitely would make a lot of sense. And with buprenorphine, it is actually possible, and we are investigating all of our different buprenorphine formulations for the treatment of pain as well.
Yep.
So we're looking forward to completing those trials and bringing something to market that can't be abused or even overdosed on because of the ceiling effect that buprenorphine has.
Terrific. We have to take our last break. When we come back, we'll find out what the healthcare industry and government must do to address the growing problem of addiction. You're listening to the Costa Report.
Big data is changing the way organizations work. From data-driven marketing and ad targeting to the connected car, big data is fueling product innovation and new revenue opportunities. It's creating a culture in which business and IT leaders join forces to realize value from all data. They infuse analytics everywhere and make speed a differentiator, gaining competitive advantage from faster, more informed decisions. Leading organizations are creating new business models, developing new roles, and defining new big data architectures, including an infrastructure that can manage and process exploding volumes of structured and unstructured data, in motion as well as at rest, while protecting data privacy and security. Find out how IBM Big Data and Analytics can transform your business. Visit www.ibm.com/bigdata today.
In the opening of All Quiet on the Western Front, Eric Maria Remarque wrote, "This book is to be neither an accusation nor a confession, and least of all, an adventure, for death is not an adventure to those who stand face to face with it. It will simply try to tell of a generation of men who, even though they may have escaped its shells, were destroyed by the war. Today, Project Healing Waters offers men and women that have escaped the shells of war the opportunity to heal by teaching our returning veterans to fly fish in some of the most beautiful, tranquil rivers in our country. These natural surroundings have the ability to restore the human spirit, and with your help, Project Healing Waters is able to reach out to thousands of our men and women in the military every year. For information on how you can help, go to projecthealingwaters.org. Please give and give generously to those who have put their lives on the line for you. That's projecthealingwaters.org. Help those who have escaped the shells of war and need your help to come all the way back.
It's always open house at the Mike Young Real Estate Hour, and you are always invited to walk right in and join the discussion. Hello, I am Mike Young, and I love talking real estate with all the experts and with you. So get a jump on the Real Estate Weekend every Friday, 7 p.m. on the Mike Young Real Estate Hour, right here on Listen and Be Heard Radio KSCO. The Mike Young Real Estate Hour is brought to you by Thunderbird Real Estate, Real People Selling Real Estate, by Rick Williams at American Pacific Mortgage, and by Steve Manville at Farmers Insurance. Friday at 7. See you then.
Care from the Heart is a dedicated and professional home health care agency that's been serving families in the Tri-County Monterey Bay area for over 18 years. We help our clients and their families handle health challenges with determination, love, and humor. When you work with Care from the Heart, we provide assistance with the utmost respect. Your team will consist of nurses, case managers, and home care specialists who will listen, and you will design a flexible program to fit your specific needs, either short-term or long-term. You might need help with medication, personal hygiene, meal preparation, transportation, companionship, household chores, or pet care. We can even help you with the dreaded insurance paperwork. If the time has come when you must step into the role of caregiver for a family member, naturally you'll have questions and concerns. Care from the Heart offers classes that provide specific information and skills you'll need to become the positive and supportive influence your family member deserves. And we protect against caregiver burnout by offering periodic respite care for you. Whatever your individual situation, now or in the future, help is available. For a complimentary consultation, call us at 831-476-8316. We can come to you, or you are welcome to visit our office in Santa Cruz near Dominican Hospital. Our website is carefromtheheart.net.
Welcome back to the Costa Report. I'm Rebecca Costa, and my guest today is Miss Beshad Sheldon. Now, let's talk about government oversight for a moment. What do you say to people who are worried that there's collusion going on between big pharma, government, insurance companies, and that's at the root of these addictions?
I don't know about collusion, but there is a confluence of unfortunate processes and systems that seems to have led to things getting bad and to being very slow in improving.
Well, tell us a little bit about that. What's that confluence look like? Because you've been in the pharmaceutical industry for your entire career, and it's been an amazing career. So help us as a layman try to understand, what does that confluence look like?
So to start with, you've had pharma companies who have benefited from sales of opioids, which probably started out as them thinking that these are valuable assets to the medical community, but obviously then continued to see what was going on and didn't really change track the way one would have wanted them to. Then once it became clear that there were a number of people who are suffering from the disease of addiction and need help, the response was, for the most part, to marginalize these people, to incarcerate them. When finally people started paying for treatment, unfortunately, it was in the way of putting people in residential rehab centers who, of all the different modalities of treatment, have the least amount of evidence behind sustained ability to keep people relapse-free. So these, often cost anywhere from $10,000 to $30,000 a month to be in a residential rehab place. And then people come out, and a month later, 2 months later, 3 months later, they relapse and they die. And they're particularly vulnerable because they've lost tolerance. Their brain doesn't remember what it can handle, and the same 5 bags of heroin that could barely get them high will kill them. And, it's taken a really long time for these kinds of places to recognize they actually need to incorporate medicine into their practices. Then you have the, criminalization of a disease. So, people who are, trying to get enough money together to go pay, which is a whole other part of the issue. So Medicaid and even some commercial payments to doctors have been traditionally so low that many clinicians don't take any insurance. So you're left with a cash system and patients having to get together whatever they can to go pay for one visit at a time. And if you can't afford, if you can't afford to pay, you're going to have to figure out some way to do it. You have to sell something, either your body or your possessions or your mother's possessions, and so you end up in the kinds of behaviors that people associate with the disease. So that's kind of what I'm talking about the confluence of unfortunate events that have come from not paying attention in the first place. Then when you realize there was a problem, not putting forward the resources even with the financial medical resources to try and deal with it, versus just putting someone in jail and thinking that you're dealing with the problem that way. And then we know that, for example, when people come out of jail, there was a study done in Baltimore that showed within 2 weeks, 5% of those 100 people, within 2 weeks they were dead. And this is not the way to deal with the problem. And the ones who live end up in this circle of relapse, contracting other diseases like hepatitis, which obviously still have an even greater burden on society. So that's why we need to get back to dealing with the fact that this is a disease and get over the stigma and put the resources, financial, medical, to treat people in an outpatient setting with medication, which is probably the most cost-effective, certainly the most evidence-based way to treat people, rather than trying to do rehab and then on the other end, when people relapse, just giving them Narcan to bring them back, which is obviously important and great to do. But if you then release them back into the same life without any kind of medical treatment or follow-on treatment or protection, then you end up with a case like Prince, where he was revived and then a week later he relapsed and unfortunately died.
Yeah, I think that when we look at the empirical evidence, we see that the opportunity to be rehabilitated from an opioid-based addiction by going to rehab, the percentages are pathetically low without some kind of outpatient and some kind of medicine, actual medicine treatment. I have to ask you this question because I'm not sure I know the answer. What's in it for doctors? What's in it for doctors to be prescribing so many opioid-based painkillers?
I think most doctors start out trying to do the best they can for their patients. I think this just got out of control. It became a habit. In the pharma world, like the hardest thing to do is change doctors' habits once they become ingrained. Because after a while, it becomes an automatic response. Okay, I have a tooth extraction. Let me write this 10 oxys. I have a broken limb. Let me write this. It just becomes habit. I don't think doctors have tried to do anything wrong. They were probably, worst case scenario, not paying as much attention as they could have been.
Yeah, not
but
aware.
I think that the most important thing is, if we're going to point fingers, the biggest pointing is to the disease. It's a disease, and it's there, and now we have to deal with it. We have to take care of people who have the disease. They deserve the same kind of innovation and treatment that people with any other chronic disease have. That they deserve to get their lives back. And you can see with medical treatment, and then there are 3 medicines that are FDA approved, and you can see people get their lives back. You hear about this. They get their children back. They get jobs, and so the most important thing is for them to be alive. The second thing is for them to be functional members of society, having their lives back, and the third thing is for them to be using less.
Absolutely, and that's well said. We do have the medical technology and the empirical evidence to be able to cure addicts and turn the trend the other way, in the other direction. Unfortunately, that is all the time that we have today, but before we let you go, I want to thank you for taking time to bring this subject to our attention and also for taking a scientific approach to the growing danger of opioid addiction. Thank you, Ms. Sheldon.
Thank you so much.
If your station is leaving us after this hour and you have a question or a comment to make about our interview with Beshad Sheldon, you can email me at RebeccaCosta.com or drop me a note on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. And if you missed the full interview with Sheldon or any of our other guests, you can download previous episodes of the Costa Report from Apple iTunes, Podbean, our YouTube channel, and also our website at RebeccaCosta.com. And while you're at our website, be sure to check out our audio blog and the videos that we've got posted, as well as the contact page where you can leave your comments about today's program or anything else that you've got on your mind. That's also where you can order your copy of my book, The Watchman's Rattle, a book that explains for the first time why it's become so difficult to separate facts from opinions and hearsay, and how history demonstrates that when this occurs, collapse is not far behind, folks. When government leaders can no longer identify the facts, public policy soon becomes irrational because it becomes based on unproven beliefs. Get the Watchman's Rattle. Learn about what you can look for and, more importantly, why this repetitive cycle keeps occurring and what can be done to stop it. Go to RebeccaCosta.com. That's my name.com. Only takes a couple of minutes. And if you're a regular listener of the Costa Report, you'll be happy to know that 100% of proceeds from book sales go toward keeping interviews like the one you heard today on the air. This is one way that we've been able to maintain our independent status and bring you in-depth guest interviews that you will hear nowhere else. So do your part. Go to RebeccaCosta.com, myname.com. Order your autographed copy of a book that has been a bestseller in 21 countries. That's right, 21 countries. Top of the bestseller list. That's The Watchman's Rattle. Unfortunately, our producers were not able to confirm our guest for next week before our broadcast today, so please check your local station or our website at RebeccaCosta.com for who'll be on the hot seat exactly 7 days from now, right here on the only news program that puts policy ahead of politics. Now stay tuned for another hour of Straight Talk Radio. You're listening to the Costa Report. Hi, I'm Rebecca Costa, and I want to tell you about a new sponsor of the Costa Report, Michael Zwirling, the founder of ZBS Radio Associates. Michael, or MZ as he's known, is a self-made millionaire who's operated KSCO AM 1080 in Santa Cruz, California for over 25 years. But what's truly fascinating is that MZ didn't make his fortune in radio or by working for others. He built his wealth by thinking outside the box, and now he wants to share his success with you to help you get out of the rut of working day after day just to pay your bills. In the coming months, you're going to hear tips on this program from MZ and people who have followed his advice. Pay close attention, keep an open mind, and then check out the videos and websites he recommends. There's still opportunity in the land of opportunity. Let MZ show you how easy it is to turn your financial situation around today and do it all on your own terms.
Getting a great night's sleep is easier and more affordable than you might think. You don't need a new expensive mattress or sleeping pills. You just need to change your sheets. Hi, I'm Scott Tannen, founder of Boll & Branch. What makes Boll & Branch sheets different is that they're meticulously crafted from pure 100% organic cotton. And because we only sell online, we've cut out all the expensive retail markups. Plus, if you go to bollandbranch.com today, we'll give you $50 off your first set of sheets when you use promo code RUSH. bollandbranch.com. Spelled B-O-L-L and branch.com. Promo code RUSH.
The Cannabis Connection is the educational outlet for all to engage with policy, science, culture, and local developments in order to orient the community in the rapidly evolving cannabis renaissance. Our goal is to open a dialogue surrounding the potential that this plant provides to heal people's ailments, but also heal our society from a social and economic standpoint. Tune in to the Cannabis Connection, Friday nights, 8 to 9 p.m. on KSCO AM 1080.
Serving Northern California for over 65 years. This is KSCO Santa Cruz.